it is true that Obama was resistant to sending that amount of arms, those type of arms, into Ukraine. It was done under the Trump administration, and it was escalated significantly under Biden. They sent Kamala Harris to basically threaten that Ukraine was going into NATO, and shortly thereafter, Russian troops rolled en masse into Ukraine in February of 2022. From IndieB, who says, quote, "Why do you keep saying Obama was reluctant to arm Ukraine? That's not true. We started arming the Nazis in Ukraine in 2014, not 2017. When Trump came in, all he did was keep what the Congress was doing going on. He didn't stop them, but he didn't start that either. That was started by Biden, Newland, Obama. Obama is quoted sometimes as expressing, quote, an Obama doctrine, acknowledging that Russia had an existential interest in Ukraine, whereas we do not, and that we wouldn't fight a war there. That didn't mean he didn't arm them. He was the president in February 2014 when he had Newland Biden overthrow the government of Ukraine using our NGOs and pretending we had nothing to do with it." All right. It's interesting. Obviously, I'm the one who, maybe there are other people too, but I am somebody who frequently cites that interview that Obama gave with Jeffrey Goldberg in The Atlantic on the way out in 2016, where Jeffrey Goldberg confronted him about why he didn't do more to stand up to the Russians, both in Syria and Ukraine. And it was then he said about Ukraine, Obama did, Ukraine is a vital interest and always has been and always will be to Russia. It's right on the other side of their border. It never has been and never will be a vital interest to the United States. And the idea that we're going to confront Russia over who rules Crimea or various provinces in the Donbass is incredibly foolish. This was obviously before Russiagate, when Democrats could get away with saying things like that. And then I can just cite to you news articles at the time in 2015, in June of 2015, there's a New York Times article headlined, "Defying Obama, Many in Congress Pressed to Arm Ukraine." And it's about how members of both parties in Congress were furious that Obama wouldn't send lethal arms to Ukraine. And here are the first few paragraphs. Quote, with the peace process stalled and violence escalating in Ukraine, a bipartisan coalition in Congress is defying President Obama by pressing the administration to provide weapons to the embattled nation. The Senate has included provisions in its military policy bill to arm Ukraine with anti-armor systems, mortars, grenade launchers, and ammunition to aid in its fight against Russian-backed separatists. It would also prevent the administration from spending more than one-half of $300 million in aid for Ukraine unless 20% is earmarked for offensive weapons. The House has passed a similar measure. So far, the Obama administration has refused to provide lethal aid, fearing that it would only escalate the bloodshed and give President Vladimir Putin of Russia a pretext for further incursions. And then there's an editorial in the Wall Street Journal in March of 2022, the headline of which is, "Why Obama Didn't Arm Ukraine." Quote, "He misunderstood Putin and the reality of military force in foreign affairs." And the whole article is saying this, quote, "As for Mr. Obama, he should be remembered as the president who refused to sell lethal defensive weapons to Ukraine. Even after Mr. Putin seized Crimea in 2014, he wouldn't even sell Javelin anti-tank weapons of the kind that are now helping Ukraine's military slow Russia's invading army. That was bad enough, but his logic for doing so misunderstands both Mr. Putin and world affairs." And then it quotes from that Atlantic article explaining that Putin acted in Ukraine in response to basically a client state that was going to slip out of his grasp. Now, it's not a full-scale defense of Obama. You're absolutely right that the coup in 2014 that Hillary Clinton and Victoria Nuland and John McCain and Chris Murphy carried out through the State Department was obviously undertaken during the Obama administration. But President Trump today, when meeting with President Zelensky, and he said this before, reminded Zelensky, look, Obama wouldn't even give you javelins, anti-tank weapons. I'm the one who gave you that. And it's something I often pointed out because in 2017 and 2018, when the media narrative was Donald Trump is a Russian agent, he's controlled through blackmail by Putin, that insanity, the reality was it was the Trump administration that authorized the provision of lethal aid and certain kinds of weapons, including the javelins, to Ukraine that Obama refused to provide. That is just true. That's what Trump himself said today. That's what those newspaper articles that are contemporaneous and after the fact, and they just cited, say as well. I remember it very well. I remember talking about it very well. And it was Democrats and Republicans constantly attacking Obama, even accusing him of being too soft on Russia, scared of Putin, whatever, because he wouldn't send those arms to Ukraine. It doesn't exonerate Obama. He allowed a lot of interference by the United States, by Hillary Clinton, by Victoria Nuland in Ukraine, much of which provoked or led to the provocation of Russia feeling besieged and threatened. And you can also say that Trump only gave lethal weapons because he was under so much pressure to prove that he wasn't a Russian agent, or that there were people on his side of his administration, as we know is true, that were neocons and hawks who kind of did it despite him. But it was always, the main point to me was that while the media was claiming that Putin controlled Trump, and they were all running around, what does Putin have on Trump sexually, financially, politically, constantly implying that he was captive to Putin's demands. Trump, number one, provided lethal arms to Ukraine on the other side of the Russian border, and number two, kept agitating to force the Europeans, and especially the Germans, to cease buying natural gas from Russia through Nord Stream 2. In other words, Trump was attacking the two most important vital interests of Russia, Nord Stream 2, selling natural gas to Europe, and sending lethal arms to Ukraine, while the media was moronically and idiotically suggesting that he was somehow controlled and blackmailed by Putin. So it is true that Obama was resistant to sending that amount of arms, those type of arms, into Ukraine. It was done under the Trump administration, and it was escalated significantly under Biden. They sent Kamala Harris to basically threaten that Ukraine was going into NATO, and shortly thereafter, Russian troops rolled en masse into Ukraine in February of 2022.